everybody, and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm really excited because today we're going to be making one of my favorite dessert treats. What's funny is in all of the years that I've been making these, after I perfected the recipe, I've never actually come up with a name for them. They're just called Dr. Ponce's cookies or Tim's cookies. I've never thought about much of a name, so maybe y'all can come up with a name for me. But it's going to be a spin on a classic chocolate chip cookie. But it's so much more than a chocolate chip cookie. This cookie incorporates milk chocolate, white chocolate, and English toffee. The English toffee is really the key to making this cookie great. And the best part is that because the toffee is chopped up small, you're not going to get large chunks of toffee in it. And most people can't even tell it's there. All they know is that the cookie tastes amazingly delicious and very buttery. A fun fact about these cookies, I developed this recipe and sort of perfected it when I was working on my master's degree. I sold some of these cookies to other people in a frozen dough format to help pay for my master's degree. So you know they're good if people are willing to pay for them. So without further ado, let's talk about making cookies. Okay, so this recipe is going to start like many cookie recipes do, which is going to be with 2 sticks of butter. Now the first step in most cookie recipes is going to be to cream the butter. When you cream butter, you take a softened butter, so usually at room temperature is best. If not, you can microwave it for a few seconds in the microwave to kind of get a little bit softer. We don't want it hard. What we're trying to do is to beat it with either this paddle attachment or with a spoon so that we can soften it and that we can introduce air. Now, typically when you cream, you'll also add some sort of sugar. Sugar tends to be very hard, right? It's like little crystals. And what happens is when you put the sugar in there and you beat it with the fat, in this case it's going to be butter, it's going to poke all these little tiny holes into the fat. When you do that, it's going to make it light and fluffy, and that's exactly what we want to start our cookie base. Because cookie dough tends to be a little bit lighter. We want them to not be dense or hard. We want our cookies to be nice and chewy and soft when we bite into them. So let's go ahead and put in 2 sticks of butter, and we'll start the creaming process. So to help the creaming process along, we're going to go ahead and add that sugar. I have 3/4 of a cup of white castor sugar. This is regular sugar. And 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And we'll go ahead and get those mixing. And again, we want to mix it until it's light and fluffy. Okay, so this is pretty light and fluffy. If you need to, you might have to scrape down the sides of your bowl with a spatula. It just depends on how your mixer or if you're mixing by hand works. So now I'm going to add 1 egg. And I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, good quality salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. All right, so it doesn't take long for those things to come together. Now we're going to add some vanilla extract. So I actually make my own vanilla extract. And here's the deal with vanilla extract. It's really easy to make your own. It just takes a little bit of initial time and investment. So vanilla extract is simply going to be vodka and vanilla beans. So you can see I have vanilla beans in here. There's maybe about 35 in here. And the good thing is that vanilla beans can be kind of expensive, but when you're making extract, all you really need is what are called extract grade vanilla beans. So extract grade vanilla beans are kind of like the B team of vanilla beans. They're a little bit drier. They aren't as pretty. And that doesn't really matter when you're making extract, because what you're going to have to do is put about, like I said, this is a small jar, but I put about 35 in here and then filled it up with vodka, mid-grade vodka. You don't want the cheapest thing in the world, but you also you don't need the most expensive thing. You close it up and you leave it in a dark place for about a year. I'm not kidding, 12 months. Every month or so, I would usually take it out of my closet and shake it. But a year later, you will have some of the best tasting vanilla extract you have ever had in your life. Now, if you don't make your own homemade vanilla extract, that's totally cool. You can just go ahead and buy some at the store. The best thing about this, though, is that I've had this extract for quite some time, because when you get low, all you do is simply top back up, put a little bit more vodka in there, add a couple more vanilla beans, 2 or 3 here or there, shake it, and you're good to go. I know one person who got some vanilla beans and vodka to start her own homemade vanilla like this when she was married, and now she's been married for almost 40 years. It's the same jar and everything. So it can last you quite a while. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And again, if you don't make your own, you're totally fine. You can get it from the store. Alright, so that looks good. Now this is really wet for a cookie dough. And the reason it's really wet is because we're going to add our second to last ingredient, which is going to be our all-purpose flour. Now there's quite a bit of flour in these cookies. It's 2 1/4 cup. Now I like to put that flour in slowly and in 2 batches. So the first batch of flour I always put in is going to be 1 1. Alright, so that looks good, but still too wet to be a good cookie dough. So I'm going to add 1 more cup, making for a total of 2 1/4. And again, mix it on low. Now we've got something that looks a lot more like cookie dough consistency, but there's no chocolate in it, right? So here's where the rubber's going to meet the road and where you're going to be able to make some decisions. I'm getting ready to add 1/4 of a bag of milk chocolate, 1/4 of a bag of white chocolate chips, and then half a bag of Heath brand English toffee that's been chopped up. And I'll show you that bag here in a second. Okay, so we end up equaling 1 whole bag, which is typically what you would use for a cookie recipe. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and just make these chocolate chip cookies and drop out the white chocolate and the toffee, that would be totally fine. You would just go ahead and use an entire bag of whatever type of chocolate you wanted to use. And so, again, this is a pretty flexible, at this point, we start adding the additions, the chips. But again, I'm going to be using, for my cookies that I've made so famous, at least in my estimation, 1/4 bag milk chocolate, 1/4 bag white chocolate, and half a bag of English toffee. Okay, so here is the Heath that I like to use. It's the English toffee bits with the blue label. Heath also makes one that has milk chocolate mixed in. Those will work okay, but I like having the separate milk chocolate and toffee so I can kind of control the ratio a little bit more myself. The one that has it mixed in has an orange label. Again, that'll totally work. You can get these at Walmart, Kroger, lots of grocery stores carry this. It's just right over with all the other chocolate chips. So I'm going to go ahead and add the little candy pieces there. And I'm going to mix this on low. Normally what would be suggested for you in a cookie recipe would be to fold the mixture together, which means you kind of use a scooping up and over motion with like a spatula. I'm a little too lazy for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix it on low, and the reason they want you to fold it is so that these pieces don't end up getting broken. I don't really care if my chocolate pieces end up getting broken because it's going to taste awesome. So, all right, and now we have cookie dough. Okay, so we have to decide what we're going to do at this point. We have 2 options. Just like with the pumpkin bread, these cookies freeze really, really well. What we can do is we can scoop these out into round balls using a cookie scoop, or we can take small, about a tablespoon, is what I do, and roll them with our hands. I prefer the cookie scoop method. And we can either bake them now, which if we do that, we're going to in a preheated oven at 375 for about 11 minutes. You're going to want to really watch these cookies because of the toffee. If the toffee gets heated for too long, the cookie ends up getting crisp and hard. So you want them to be just golden brown when you take them out of the oven. I also wouldn't let them sit on the pan for too long because they will continue cooking. I'd let them sit for maybe a minute or 2 just to cool down, and then use a spatula to take them off of the pan and either move them onto a wire cooling rack, or if you don't have one, for many, many years I did not, I just used my kitchen counter. I just made sure it was clean. And I transferred them off the pan onto the kitchen counter. It wasn't hot enough to damage the counter, but it was cool enough to keep the cookies from continuing to cook. Now let's say you wanted to make these ahead of time and freeze them. So what you would do is you would make the cookie dough balls, either by scoop or by hand, and then you would put them on a cookie sheet, and then you would put them into your freezer individually, right? So now you have those little individual balls sitting in your freezer, either on a cookie sheet or on a plate or something like that where they're not touching each other. Let them get frozen. So it's going to take a little bit of time, a couple hours. Then pull them out of the freezer, pop them off the plate or the cookie sheet, and put them in a zip top bag. Or if you have some sort of thing that you can suck the air out of it, like a food saver or some sort of vacuum sealer, you can do that as well. And you can take them out one at a time and cook them at a lower temperature. It's going to be 350 degrees, so a little bit lower, for about 17 to 18 minutes. And that will include both the thawing and the baking time. So it takes a little bit longer, but they will come out wonderful. They will taste great. This is another way I'm able to serve cookies so regularly within my classes and at meetings, is that I can on the weekends make large batches of cookies, freeze them in my deep freeze, and then pop them in as I'm getting ready in the morning. So hopefully your cookies turn out awesome. I bet they will. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to me. And thank you again for watching Bakespeare.